You know, it doesn't talk down to the students. Yes, it's a pretend situation, but the responses, the justifications, and the reasonings that come out are quite adult.
Yeah, and I mean, another way to go beyond the speaking part to the writing part is to incorporate, giving your opinion, but then having supportive sentences. You know, why do you hate S so much? And it's because of this, this, and this. So it does, again, kind of play off of what I said earlier, which is about patterns of organization and so on.
Yep, absolutely.
And not to mention bringing in the whole lexis about giving your opinion.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And Denise has just added a very nice suggestion for an extension activity, a role play, or write what happens next, because all we've got is when H heard this, he said, "Then I'll marry you. I've always loved you."
Yeah.
Finish the story.
What happened to all the other letters? How did they feel when she did that? Yeah.
And where's Zed whenever you need him? Yeah, exactly. So there's I think it's a lot of extension possibilities to this. And as I said, there's a lot of kind of pop psychology involved in the activities here as well, which I think is quite interesting. Let me just go on to the next thing. Now, one of the issues is things to keep in mind. Okay, now I just love that icon there. I mean, gravestones. I just love that. Could cause death. But basically, again, we're talking about a task-based approach in general. We're talking about content that is adult in nature, funny as well. So humor is also a bit of a risky thing, and you're dealing with a lot of speaking skills. So there's always things to keep in mind when you're working with these types of activities. So, and one of them is you have to be open to unexpected creativity. Sometimes you don't know what the students are going to come up with, and sometimes it's even riskier than you wanted, or they take it in a direction that you had not anticipated. And so I think it's very important that when that happens, that you stay open to where they want to lead you. That a lot of these activities, unless there is a clear kind of black and white answer as to, well, actually, this is the order of the sentences, not that. Unless, but there's a lot of activities that are very opinion-based. And so it's very important that we don't accidentally slide into the correction of opinions or correction of a creative spark. It's very, I mean, creativity is one of those things that I think can be difficult to generate, and can be very, very easy to inadvertently shut down and make people, because some people feel very vulnerable. It's a very new skill for some people to suddenly be using their imagination, using creativity. It's a bit of a risk thing here for some adults, and but I think a worthy one. All right, I'm going to keep going, but please feel free to type in the box any other things that you think are important to keep in mind when you're working with this framework and these kinds of activities. All right, now one of the other things that comes up is spontaneity, and making sure that you're also on your toes, that you actually can respond to what students are coming up with, and that can just require just a little bit of anticipation. Having a look at the activity and thinking, I'm not quite sure. They might have questions about this, or they might have questions about that. So anyway, just be ready for, because you're tapping into people's imaginations and you're tapping into creative energy and invention, people necessarily need to be bringing past experiences, other connections that they've made to things, and so questions that they hadn't anticipated, or sometimes are difficult to anticipate just from the material itself, will come up. And at that point, I mean, it's a bit of a classroom management issue, it could be, where you decide to go that route. Other people are really interested with what's cropped up, or you don't. But being prepared to kind of accept that to happen in your classroom, and then know that you're going to have to make a decision one way or the other, I think is important. Okay. Again, anticipation of what might need, particularly for some of these reading texts, you may find that you do need to gloss first. You need to pre-teach some vocabulary, and again, it's just having a look at what the task is, and is there anything in the task that you think is really going to stop the student from being able to comprehend. If it is, again, fine. You know, it's still your decision as to whether or not you want to pre-teach it. But if you don't pre-teach it, then just be prepared to have to clarify in order to reach the comprehension answer afterwards.
Yeah, and having said that, I mean, almost all these activities are inspirational activities that you can, you know, take what it is that the book is suggesting and, you know, make your own activities from it to suit the level that you're doing. Like, you don't have to teach the vocabulary that's in here because you think, in order to do this activity, I have to do this. You know, if you have a lower level class that the context doesn't suit, you know, then obviously you can just make your own.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And also, because I would say that this book is pretty much geared at intermediate and above.
Definitely.
Okay, something else that I'm hugely big on is task feedback before error focus. So if you do use these activities to practice language or as a launch pad for language, or you're going to do some kind of error correction afterwards, which I think is a great idea because then it really underlines you know, a more solid learning aim from some people's perspective. Some cultures will find it very difficult to just think that the lesson is done if all they've done is kind of chatted about something and, okay, it was engaging and interesting, but at the end of the day, have they actually learned any new language? What have they done? What have they learned that they didn't know before they came into your classroom? And so there's that combination of error-focused feedback, but task feedback as well. And I think that these type of activities, they are engaging because they engage people on a psychological and an emotional level. And if you're asking people to be engaged on a psychological and an emotional level, you have to acknowledge that level of effort and input that they've provided in your class. So I think one of the ways to kind of kill these activities is to do an activity, get everybody riled up. For example, the one we were just looking at where, you know, maybe they're really getting upset with S and they think L is, you know, just horrible. Well, fine. Let them do that, but then just suddenly say, okay, stop, stop, stop. Here's some errors I heard. It really kills it. Then it's a bit like you're just putting them through their paces for your entertainment, not theirs. And a lot of these tasks are designed to, as I said right at the beginning, to take language out as the whole reason for doing everything. It's the language is there, but you want to engage them on a level that makes them forget about the language for a while, that there's another means to the end here. And so doing task feedback first grants them the acknowledgement of, I know you've put this effort into it, I think you've done a great job, what did you guys think, what did you guys think, some kind of task feedback, and then, okay, now let's have a look at the language you used. You know, let's look at how you were justifying. Let's look at how you were reasoning. How you were giving your opinions. Let's look at some pronunciation issues that came up, that type of thing. But I do think that that feedback, that double feedback stage needs to be clearly allocated, and for time as well. So when you're planning these types of lessons, you know, the general rule of thumb is however long the activity takes, plan for your feedback to take at least that long as well. Doesn't mean it will, but if you plan it into your lesson, it's not something that's going to get chopped off at the end. Okay, now the other thing as well, you know, again, most of us are teaching, particularly, you know, here in Canada, we're teaching a lot of multilingual classes, multicultural classes, and so, you know, just being aware of the personal nature of some of these activities. You know, sometimes things affect people in ways that you really can't anticipate. You know, I remember doing a story with it's actually not from this book, but it's a very similar type of activity where you start telling a story, and then the students have to fill in little descriptions. So, for example, there were two brothers, and they lived in a village. Describe the village. And then they either record themselves speaking the description, or they briefly write a couple of keywords that they're going to create sentences with later. I did what I thought was, well, a dramatic story. I wanted it to be interesting. But anyway, I had somebody completely burst into tears in the middle of the class and run out, and I felt absolutely awful. And to this day, I don't really know why the story upset her so much, but it was memorable.